Today on Locked On Phoenix Suns, trades galore, culture talk, and more. It's a Locked On Suns mailbag next.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Phoenix Suns. I'm Brendon, Kleen, a staff writer at Awful Announcing and a credentialed Suns media member. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen to close out your week. Happy Game Day Friday. Don't forget Locked On Suns, free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. So click that follow or subscribe button. Do what thousands of other Suns fans have already done. Become an everydayer and get locked on to the Phoenix Suns right here each and every day. Today's episode is brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. More from FanDuel later on in the show. Joining me, as always, from the wonderful West Valley, my fellow Suns credential media member. How are we feeling on this Friday, Ben Garcia?
Are you saying like physically or mentally? Because physically, I'm like at 70%. I think this, if Jordan had a flu game, this is my flu podcast game. But I was gone for a couple of days, and Colin Gillespie's the new Steve Nash, and Kevin Durant's going to stay for years on end, and the Suns are just back. Hey, the funniest thing about that Suns win, which I told you, I've just been down for the count for the past couple of days, so I've been just out of it, is the Suns milked that win for all that it was worth on social media. They have been nonstop posting about it, and I just thought that was really funny. That was the one noticeable thing that I've seen over the past couple of days. But either way, I'm excited to get into these questions. We have some good ones.
Yeah, thank you to everybody. We will see if the Suns cash in on the court on that win at all. On Friday night, they take on the Denver Nuggets. So that'll be the real test, I think, to continue it, beyond one quarter. But we'll get to a ton of different questions today. We got some on our YouTube channel. We got some on X. We got some, a bunch on the Suns subreddit, as you guys always tend to come in clutch on those over there. But we're going to start with a lot of people's questions and basically just sum it up into one, I think. So this was from Andre on X. This was from, let me see here, at the 2K Simulation Guy on YouTube, and a multitude of different folks on the Suns subreddit, basically asking this question. I think actually Tom Cruise's PC on Reddit kind of worded it the most succinctly. Is there any chance Beal gets traded in the offseason instead of Durant and the Suns end up keeping Durant? I think that's basically the gist of it. And I obviously did an episode where I talked about, hey, Kevin Durant, or I did a segment, I should say, where, hey, Kevin Durant's actions don't exactly seem like somebody who's fully out the door. I had a tweet go viral to that degree too, and people are kind of, I think, of mixed responses. He's just being professional. He's just playing nice. You're crazy. He's still gone. There's some people who think, well, maybe he still wants to be here, but the Suns have no choice but to trade him because the team's going nowhere and he's the only chess move left. And there's some people who said, oh, it's media propaganda, you moron. He was never going to go anywhere anyway. Shout out to you guys. Always keeping it nice and polite over there on Twitter. But where do you stand on it, Ben, in terms of the practical reality of what's going to happen this summer with Durant?
Yeah, I got to be honest with you, man. It's a really good observation that you made. It's one of the things that makes me jealous at times, the ability that you can kind of assess those things, whether it's at the game or on social media. I thought it was a really good point you would put out there. But getting back to the original question at hand is there a chance you move Beal and, you're keeping KD? I think if that was the case, they would have already done it already. And I think they would have done that at the deadline had they had anything. But because I didn't see really anyone chomping at the bit to go after Beal, it would be tough. I'm working on not speaking in definites anymore, but I think it'd be really tough for you to go into the offseason and find a suitor for Beal without giving up more assets, like multiple assets, which I want to follow through with you in just a second, and then find a way to build around KD with then really nothing left. I'll let you answer that, and then I got something for you.
Yeah, I think that, so like a music lover in Cali asked this on Reddit too about being able to trade Beal. And I actually have something from you as well. I think people are understanding that it's going to be very difficult. And I think you're right that we got a taste of just how difficult it's going to be when the whole Jimmy Butler saga was playing out from November all the way through February. And there wasn't a market. The one thing I would hold out hope is, so you're right, if they're going to trade Beal, they're giving something in addition to Beal to get off of him. There's no world at any point from now through the end of Bradley Beal's contract, unless he just becomes a wholly new player and healthy as can be all of a sudden, which isn't going to happen, that you're going to get something for Bradley Beal. That ship has sailed. So you're giving something. They do still have those 3 firsts that they acquired, some seconds, some players, whatever, but the one thing I meant to include when I talked about this solo that I just ran out of time for and figured it would come up again was the Wizards. There's been reporting since the deadline that the Wizards were one of the teams that was maybe the most actively interested. You know, we talked about Atlanta after the fact, and I think there was one other team that ended up just making other types of moves. I think actually Washington might have been one of the ones that we talked about too, and they ended up getting off of Valanciunas and everything else in different ways. But I would imagine that would likely include Jordan Poole, maybe Marcus Smart also, players like that the Wizards are just sort of dumping, and they say, hey, what harm is it to keep Brad around? He's a fan favorite. Let him play out his contract while we're still rebuilding and move on. Maybe Chris Middleton would be another guy. So I don't know if that's exciting anybody, but I do think you could probably do that type of a trade without having to give up too much. Again, the question just becomes, is that good enough to still feel like it's even worth running it back again with Durant if, all things considered, you're just getting different vets who cost a little less but might not be making you all that much better?
Yeah, to me that's more of a lateral move, especially getting off of Beal feels better than what exactly it would cost you. I don't know, because I still struggle to think, Brendon, that you could trade Beal and get back, even if it is, like, I don't know how the money works, but Chris Middleton I know makes a grip. Marcus Smart makes decent money. Like, I still think you're going to have to give up something just to get off of Beal because the Suns would be so desperate to do so. I think people know where I stand on this. I think it's close to impossible because I feel like they would have already done it by now. I feel like they would have already taken a loss by now. Let me ask you this. I saw this earlier today, and I thought it'd be a great spot to insert this. Would you trade, because this would probably keep you from trading all those draft picks, would you be willing to part with Bradley Beal, say the Wizards, say the Hawks, but that means you would have to add Ryan Dunn to the mix too? Would you trade Bradley Beal just to get off of him, and the sweetener would be Ryan Dunn in a deal? Would you do that?
No, I would not do that.
Why? Just why?
Because it's just not worth it. I mean, you know, there's a late first round pick. Like this year, they have Cleveland's pick, right? So that, sure, I don't really care about that. But Ryan Dunn is a player who we've already seen exceed expectations, who fits the mold of the type of player you would even be searching to get if you were to have another chance in the draft, for instance. So that's just too much of a sure thing and a real commodity to get rid of, in my opinion. It would be, on the whole, like a step backward, even if you are getting off Beal. And I do want to say on the Beal side, and then I'll let you answer the question, although people know you're higher on Dunn than me, so I'm sure you're going to say the same. But the other thing about getting rid of Bradley Beal, if you're able to take back less salary, is you could potentially use that as a way to get under the second apron. And maybe that in and of itself becomes enough of a reason to throw in a couple first-round picks or something to get it done. I don't know. It's a little too hypothetical for me, but that's obviously a big part of why the Suns would want to do it.
Getting rid of Ryan Dunn just to get rid of Bradley Beal would be one of the stupidest decisions, especially, like, I don't get upset with the Suns for trading Toumani Camara and DeAndre Ayton, because at the end of the day, he was a second-round pick, and we didn't know how great he was going to be. And honestly, in the summer league, I thought he was really good around the rim. I thought he struggled with the lateral quickness to keep up with some of the faster players in the NBA. And we still are yet to see Toumani Camara play in a winning, meaningful basketball games to where they're going to rely on him to be a key 3-and-D players. So the question marks I still think are there for Toumani Camara. Trading Ryan Dunn, who's a first-round pick, who I think can be as good or better than Toumani Camara at some point in his career, would be ludicrous, malpractice. All the adjectives that you could add to this would be ridiculous, especially after seeing the Toumani Camara mishap. Like, yeah, he probably is the best player in that deal. I still don't hold it against the Suns as much as other people, but that idea, because I've seen that from two bigger Suns accounts, is just crazy. Plus, you're just getting rid of Brad at that point. I would rather, and I'm not doing this at all, but I would rather move on from Dunn and a couple of first-round picks and try to get another player in here. Now you're going to have to attach someone to that deal. I don't know what that would look like, but I'd rather do that than just get rid of Dunn.
That's exactly what I was going to say, is if you're just talking about dumping Bradley Beal for the sake of getting him off the roster, maybe getting under the second apron, that's the type of trade we're talking about right now. There still could be the type of trade that the Butler thing was, right? Where Brad is just sort of the salary in order to get something else bigger done. And at that point, then yes, you're back to talking about maybe Dunn gets involved, maybe Oso gets involved, maybe, the first round picks and whatever else it's going to take. That's a different type of a conversation. As far as we are looking at right now, though, the Suns can't combine Beal and Dunn anyway. So, that's sort of an out in the wilderness type of question. We will circle back to this because we didn't really hit the Durant angle. There's some other questions on that side of it. So we'll do rapid fire from the mailbag at the very end of the show. But we want to talk about the culture and some of the bigger picture stuff because we got questions there too. So we'll hit that next. First, today's show brought to you by PrizePicks, our old friends. It's been a while. Basketball season's heating up. There's no better way to get in on the action than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With PrizePicks, you just pick more or less on at least 2-player projections for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's easy to use, available in over 30 states, and lets you mix and match projections across different sports. So, right now, it is basketball time of year, right? We know that. The other leagues, I guess if you're a hockey person, I'm not even sure how much hockey is available on PrizePicks, but basketball's every night. The best teams, the star players are standing out. You got Luka just going off. You got, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander just smashed the more button. Like, the pretenders are separating themselves from the real teams, and that means it's a little easier for you to know what's going to happen, which means PrizePicks is the place to go. They also have Taco Tuesday deals. I guess shout out LeBron on that one. Discount select player projections up to 25%, giving you even more value to your lineup. Stuff like that all the time. Fast and easy. All you got to do is pick more or less on a player and their stat type to cash in. So download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after that first $5 lineup wins. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 instantly after you play. It's not even win, actually. Just play that first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game. All right, let's keep it rolling here. So we got some questions about the culture here. There's two main questions that I want to hit within this. So I believe the first one was, this is from Hufflepuffer 2234, Ben, what would be the most effective way to change the current culture of the Suns organization? But I would say we actually got one that was even more specific from Suns Reality Check on X that we can just go to, which is if you could only make one big change to one of the three front office, coach, players, which would you choose and why, and which change is the least critical? So I think we're both of the opinion that the culture is kind of the problem. So I think the answer to that second question of what the most critical change is going to be is also the answer to the first question. So what would you do? What's the biggest need as far as those three levels of the organization, and which one would you change?
Front office is tricky because I feel like people aren't talking about James Jones. I feel like they're talking about Matt Ishbia, and you can't change the owner of a team. I don't think
you can't change the owner, but you could say hire somebody with a little more power than James. You know what I mean? I think people throw out the Bob Myers concept of if they could hire that, then maybe the owner takes a step back. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that's realistic,
maybe
but I think that's an idea.
So you had said something that I think is Really interesting. You said realistic. So what I think is the most realistic opportunity to change this team, front office, head coach, players, I do think it's players. I don't mean to, rain on everyone's parade, because it was a great win the other night by the Clippers. And for some reason, the Suns just have the Clippers number this year. They went 4-0 against them. I think the best way to fix this team culture-wise is by moving players around. I don't think Kevin Durant is a culture killer, but I also don't necessarily think he is someone that establishes a culture. I thought Colin Gillespie's comments the other day on Arizona Sports were really eye-opening, where he was like, Kevin Durant's one of the best teammates that I have. He's great, all this stuff. Like, I just think Kevin Durant tends to run his course, and I don't think it's just him. I think it's obviously the Bradley Beal side of things too. Whatever it looks like as a roster shakeup, I think that's what it needs to be. And the reason why I say that is, I know people hate Coach Bud, but that'll be 3 coaches in 3 years: Monty, Frank Vogel, Coach Budenholzer. So maybe it's not the head coach. Willing to fire James Jones. You won't get an argument from me, although I will say I don't know if he's the biggest problem, and I think he's done a pretty decent job at drafting. But either way, you want to get rid of him, that's fine. I won't argue it too hard with that. So if I'm just going through those things, I do think it's players. Unless you go get Bob Myers, which I'm all in for, I just don't think that is very realistic. What about you?
So for me, the coach, here's why I don't think it's the coach, because I think the only case, and I've said this already as we've talked through the Bud stuff, the only type of coach that I think could really change anything, especially when you're talking about culture, is going to be somebody that the players want, like a Chauncey Billups, who I've mentioned in that vein before. And what that will do is, yes, it will change the culture. It'll probably be more effective in impacting the culture than Vogel or Bud were. But what it will change the culture to is just more of what the players already are creating. If it's their decision, or if it's their pushing, then we're just going to get more of the players' culture. And I think that is proven that with this mix of guys, it's not working. So that one, I don't see it happening. Players, yes, maybe, but I think it's few and far between players who really are culture setters. I think that if that's kind of what you're talking about, like winning sets a culture, yes, but like genuine, to the roots of things, culture setting, like there's a handful of dudes in the league we would probably really say that about. Even if there's a team next year with, Devin Booker, they're able to get off of Bradley Beal, they get a package they like for Kevin Durant, and get some vets in here. Maybe there's a Dylan Brooks who gets thrown in, who's going to punch dudes in the face, and there's, scrappy young guys and whatever. Like, is that a culture? Is that just competitiveness? And like, I that distinction might not be huge, but to me, that's why I end up going to the very top, because I think that more than anything else, a new GM, somebody with a bigger title than James Jones, or, more trust from Ishbia, whatever it ends up looking like. And I get what you're saying, that like you can't change the owner, and we could see a new guy take the job and still get superseded by Ishbia. And I'm totally like realistic about that. But at the end of the day, those are the people who I think we point to around the NBA most often that are able to kind of establish a top to bottom thing about, giving an identity to a team. So I think until the Suns find that, and who that guy's going to be that really has the vision for this organization, I don't think a lot of the rest of it is going to change, personally.
I would agree to that. I would say Suns front office, if and only if they get Bob Myers. I just don't think Bob Myers is going to leave his cushy job over at ESPN and with the Commanders when he just left the NBA not too long ago, probably because he was burnt out. So I don't know if of course, there's a dollar amount in the world to make anyone leave. But then you run the case of the Monty Williams thing. I think it was pretty clear Monty didn't want to coach after he was done with the Suns. I think he wanted to spend time with family and all that good stuff, right? But there was a number to get him off the couch. And when you take a job, and this is just a life thing too. This has nothing to do with just basketball. I believe when you take a job just for a paycheck, that almost always leads to a terrible decision. There is things where you love a job plus the paycheck, and that's great. But when you just take a job for a paycheck, if you just go get Bob Myers for $30 million a year, like just an insane, ridiculous number that would never happen, I think there's a chance that falls flat in your face too, because he's not necessarily into the job as well. So that's my only caveat to that.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like the more that you kind of think about and talk about this stuff, like Bob Myers, honestly, is probably not even the best example of this, right? Like I would say, like a Pat Riley is maybe the best example, and like Greg Popovich, but those guys, when they got their shots, weren't that, right? It just sort of happens. And so nobody would have said Pat Riley, when he took the Lakers job 40 years ago or whatever, was going to be that. Pop was like a military guy and took over in the mid 90s for the freaking Spurs, who no one cared about, right? So
yeah,
it's hard to even always trace that back. So I guess the reality is there's no easy answer when you're talking about something like culture. But I just think, I guess maybe my best way of putting it is, what I think is hurting the Suns culture the most right now is Ishbia meddling and having his opinions rule the day. And so I guess more I'm working backward from that. And I'm saying if that can stop, that will help the most. Like that, I guess that's maybe more of what I'm doing, rather than saying like this golden boy GM is going to suddenly fix everything, right?
Yeah, I do think Ishbia is going to learn. I think he has the phrase that is coined by Bill Simmons of the new owner syndrome. I have no worries about Matt Ishbia being a fantastic owner at some point, but he's just going to have to learn to let go of the reins a little bit. I agree with the Bob Myers point and all of it, but I just think if we're going towards the most realistic thing, I think it's players, because I've had my eyes set on one guy making a reunion back with Devin Booker, and I think they could use his leadership, especially because I don't think they're going to be championship contenders next year. A guy like Chris Paul, I think, would do wonders in that locker room again. It's not the same group of guys. It's not the same group of guys outside of Devin Booker. So I don't think he'd run his course with anyone, but I think someone like that would be interesting.
Yeah, if he would want to come back.
Exactly. Only if he'd want to come back. And I think there's
he wants that last chapter to look like, right? I mean, next year I don't know. At some point, it's going to be the end.
This year it might be the end. He's been good this year, but this year, like maybe he's someone that wants to go out on his own terms. I could totally buy that too.
Yeah. Okay. We'll go rapid fire. I do want to return to the Kevin Durant side of that first question and run through a few fun ones as well next. First, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. When the NBA tips off, the action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you missed the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. But I'm here to tell you about how to take advantage of the $150 in bonus bets courtesy of FanDuel.com with a first $5 bet win. That's all you got to do. Just find a winner and then get to work with the fun stuff. $150 in bonus bets at FanDuel.com. So let's check out college basketball, which is in full swing with the conference tournaments right now. Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern, we have Drake hosting Southern Illinois, -430 favorites at home. That's pretty good. What do we have on? Nothing on Friday yet for the women's game. NBA has to have a big favorite. Who do we have here? Who are the Wizards playing? I mean, that's really just what I look at this point. The Nets are hosting the Warriors. I mean, that's about as good as you're gonna get. cash in, get to work with your $150 in bonus bets. Then you can have some fun with futures and live bets and whatever other nonsense you want to have a blast with each and every game night throughout the rest of the spring. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Alrighty, Ben, let's roll. Keep the show rolling. Close it out, I guess I should say. Here with some more questions. So let's just close out the Kevin Durant side of this. And the place that I want to go with it is this. This one, AZ Hags asked a version of it on Reddit, and there were a couple others that I think were to the same effect. How much would it change things if the Suns are able to close the season strong? I heard somebody say, like, Eddie BC put fluking their way into the second round. I mean, that seems very, very optimistic, but AZ Hags had it as even just sneaking into the real playoffs, like getting through the play-in and even making the 8th seed. How much do you think that would change things when it comes to the prospect of keeping Kevin Durant and maybe stopping short of blowing it up and maybe going toward the Beal possibilities that we were discussing in that first segment?
Yeah, you're going to hate this answer, but I hope it doesn't happen. Like, I hope, because I don't think the Suns are a true championship contender, and because I don't think there's really any way they could fluke themselves into a first-round win, I think the worst thing you could do, especially to this front office that is aggressive to a fault recently, is murk up the clarity that you have. One of the arguments that I made to you a couple of weeks ago was, I don't think it's all that bad that the Phoenix Suns are falling on their face outside of that win against the Clippers, because what I think it does is provide this team clarity and allow them to know exactly what direction they want to be in next season. Where if you make the second round, you're then convincing yourself Kevin Durant can be here for long term and you can figure it out with limited assets. And then you run the risk of potentially next year, not running the risk, I just think this is going to happen, completely falling apart. And then Kevin Durant's 39 at that point, 38. And so you wonder what his trade value looks like then. You piss off Devin Booker. He could ask for a trade. As much as I want the Suns to win a title and make a Western Conference Finals run, and it'd be so fun to watch, anything to do to murk up the clarity that you have right now with this team, that is, they're not going to win a championship and they're not a title contender, I think is hurtful to this team. That should have been more rapid fire, but it wasn't. Sorry.
No, I think that's a great way of putting it, because it would kind of be this in-between outcome where the season didn't go so well that they were able to, improve upon last year. Although even winning one game in the first round or getting to the second round, I guess technically would be an improvement, but I think we would all know it still wasn't. But they also didn't just completely flame out. And so then it's a little bit hard to just base it on results and just fully go in one direction. To me, the question, though, bigger picture is, so this Durant extension would be for 2 years, right? We know that. It would be, he's already under contract for next season, and then 2 more after that. What that also does, in addition to just being like what the rules limit you to, is it would go exactly to the end of Devin Booker's current contract. And so I think that the question that you end up having to ask yourself is, yes, like I doubt either outcome personally. I can't really see a pathway where either outcome, keeping Durant or trading him for any of the packages we've discussed, would make you a contender next year. Like, that's basically out of the question to me. It sucks to say that, but I think that's where we are. So I think what I kind of think of it as is like, over those 3 seasons where you would then have Durant if he stays, and if he stays, it's, he's signing that extension most likely, although maybe not, maybe he just plays out the remainder of his contract. That would make things a little different. But either way, what is going to make you the most competitive or, get you where you want to be the best over those 3 seasons? Is it having Durant around, or is it having whatever you get for Durant around Devin Booker? And I think that's important to ask and answer, because The other thing looming that we have not talked about on this show at all, but I know is out there, and I know Suns fans are probably thinking about it because other places are talking about it. Devin Booker is also up for an extension this summer. And like, if you really are being as cutthroat and like analytical about the best odds of contention and being like Daryl Morey about it or whatever, right? Is like the best odds to get back to contention, in my opinion, if you're just being cutthroat about it this summer, is to trade all three of the big three and try to get something approximating a really, really high draft pick or a blue chip player back. And so if you're not doing that, you just have to be honest with yourself that you're picking an in-between anyway. Having Jabari Smith as your next best player next to Devin Booker is not like some kind of thing to do a victory lap about in terms of winning. But it's probably better than tanking emotionally, but it's probably not better than tanking to get back to contention. So I'm being long-winded back to you, but I think that that's kind of where the Suns are when they're thinking about what they got to do. Is it better to just keep things going because that's kind of easier and might be the highest floor thing? Or if not, how far are you willing to break it down to get back to the top, which is obviously where every team's trying to get?
Yeah, I think your Devin Booker, like trading all three of them, is a crazy, crazy point because, long story short, we have no idea what Jabari Smith and Cam Whitmore can turn into in a bigger role on the Suns. But I will save that argument for another day because we do have other ones to get to. But I don't think trading Devin Booker in the long run can make you better. I just emphatically disagree. But we could save that for the summertime.
Yeah, we could save it, but I think like I'm almost like not even using that as my opinion. I'm just kind of stating that like NBA logic, like the way that the NBA works is usually you're all in or you're rebuilding. That's kind of like what most teams can be sorted into. I know not everybody likes that that's kind of how the modern NBA has ended up. I think that the new CBA is trying to get a little more parity, so maybe that's an outdated way of thinking about it, but like people have probably heard, if they follow basketball coverage, like this idea of the treadmill of mediocrity. That's like something people say a lot. Like, you know, you could just go through the standings right now, and there's a lot of, like, the Heat were kind of in that situation. That's why they, you know, traded Jimmy. Or, like, the Clippers are a little bit in that mix. The Kings, that's why they traded Fox. Like, that's where you don't want to be. That's why there's rumors about Ja right now with Memphis. If you're kind of, like, not good enough to actually ever contend, but not bad enough to really rebuild, and that's what the Suns would be setting themselves up for, I think, with, especially if they just trade Durant, but maybe even if they keep him. So, you know, that's kind of what I'm saying. But as to what they should do, I think I just need more info to really answer that question. And that's one of the other difficult things when you're talking about the future is, like, by the time you start sniffing around Kevin Durant trades, you probably are just already going to have to trade him, right? Like, it's kind of hard to say, oh, we'll listen again. But by the way, if we want to ask you to come back, hopefully you do it.
I really liked your observation yesterday about Kevin Durant's not acting like someone who wants to leave the Suns, but it's really hard. My only argument to that would be it's hard to put that toothpaste back in the tube, but your observation did get me thinking a little bit. I don't think it's crazy at all.
A lot to think about. We didn't go rapid fire through anything. We talked about one question. That's fine.
We'll do
more mailbags because people like them, and there's a lot to obviously talk about as the Suns go through headed toward the summer. But one more game this week. We will not have a recap episode because it is a weekend, but we will be back with you Monday after Suns Mavs. Just what everybody wants to see on a Sunday afternoon ABC game. The
big implications for that 10 seed. Big implications.
And one of the other most embarrassing teams in the league. That's all right, though. Okay, we'll be back then. Enjoy your weekend,
at least
guys.
we're not the Mavs. It could be worse, man. We could be one of those two teams. I mean, it could be worse. It really could be. Suns fans, our poor guy, Nick Angstead, man. The season from hell for the Mavs. But anyways, sorry about that. You can end the show now.
Enjoy the weekend. We'll catch you then.